To celebrate my son getting into college, I brought out the old camera my father had left me, wanting to capture this special moment. But before I could start taking pictures, my son accidentally spilled ketchup on his shirt. Seeing this, I rushed to find some napkins. In my haste, I bumped into the camera's rewind button. Suddenly, time rewound a few minutes and my son's shirt was clean again. I felt confused and bewildered, thinking what I'd just experienced was merely a hallucination. I didn't give it much thought. Later, we left the restaurant. On our way to the school, a police car suddenly started following us. My son immediately pulled over to the side of the road. The officer walked toward us and asked where we were heading. Hearing his question, I proudly told him I was taking my son to college. The officer didn't seem suspicious after hearing this, but as he was about to leave, he noticed the camera was pointed at him and thought I was recording him. He demanded to inspect the camera, but I didn't want him to see it. In my panic, I accidentally pressed the rewind button. Time reversed again to when we were driving on the road. That's when I realized the camera could rewind time by a few minutes. To verify this discovery, I had my son pull over. Sure enough, the same police car stopped again, and the same officer got out. I became even more convinced of the camera's power. But since my son had stopped illegally, the officer demanded we leave immediately. For some unknown reason, my son suddenly started arguing with the police officer. I was about to stop my son when the officer suddenly drew his gun and aimed it at him. Seeing this situation, I immediately pressed the rewind button. This time rewound all the way back to the restaurant. At that moment, I discovered that same police officer was also eating at the restaurant. To avoid danger, I immediately took my son and left. This time, I drove myself and even changed our route. To evade that officer, we hid at a motel hoping we wouldn't be found. But unexpectedly, that police officer soon tracked us down again. This time, he asked if the luxury car downstairs belonged to us. Hearing this question, I told him I had earned the money to buy that car myself. Strangely, the officer didn't believe me at all. He seemed driven by some force to harm my son. To stop the police officer, I quickly grabbed the camera, but he suddenly tried to take my son away. I frantically pressed the rewind button. So we were back at the restaurant again. This time, the officer hadn't arrived at the restaurant yet. To avoid encountering the police officer again, I immediately left with my son. But as soon as we stepped outside, we ran into that same officer. Without time to think, I quickly took my son and fled. We drove fast all the way to my son's Uncle Jack's house. After meeting Jack, I told him the camera's secret. Jack wasn't surprised after hearing this. He said he had known about the camera's power all along. The reason the police officer kept trying to kill my son was because the camera had recorded my son's image, content, celebrating getting into college. To break this curse, I had to get my son to school before the police officer killed him, and then the curse would disappear. But there was one condition. I couldn't press the rewind button again, because each rewind would accelerate the police officer's pursuit. Hearing all this, I was completely stunned and didn't know what to do. Fortunately, Jack said he knew a secret passage that could avoid the police and go directly to the school. So we followed Jack through an underground tunnel to the school. But just as we were about to enter the school gates, that police officer appeared again, this time with many companions. Seeing this situation, I became extremely angry.